Hi, I'm Ron Hawkins. I'm here today with Michael Proctor of Clever Crow Studios.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for stopping by the Reaper Studios.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
You bet, you bet. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about Reapercon, specifically the classes that are going to be taught. Even more specifically, one of your classes, your Shaded Metallics class. So can you tell us a little bit about your Shaded Metallics class?
Sure. So with Shaded Metallics class, what you're trying to do is trying to make a convincing metallic surface on your miniature. And what we have here and what we'll be using in my upcoming class at Reapercon is Sir William the Peacemaker. I like to prime my miniatures white. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. Some people paint it black, but I usually start with the white. But when you start with the white, you'll see in the video that I'm painting what is going to be the steel painted area light blue, and it's a desaturated blue, and it's the color I'm using is Ashen Blue, which is 9057, and that's what I use for the steel area. And I just want to get a good coverage over the prime surface, so when I apply that steel coverage, it'll read a little bit better. If I was to paint the steel colored paint over the white, it would just kind of draw or zap out a lot of the color from it.
Okay, I see that you have, in addition to Ashen Blue, you have another color?
Yeah, Highlands Moss, and so I like to use that, and I'm going to be applying a gold surface, but I like to use a Reaper paint called Old Bronze, and that seems to play well with it. And again, it's another desaturated paint color, and for color theory's perspective, desaturated paint just means there's not you see how flat the color is. It's not super intense pigment.
I see. So the center of the pauldron is going to be steel, and the rim will be gold or bronze, like you said.
The rim and the little triangle in the middle.
Okay. Real quick, I was going to ask you. So, do you use water or for thinner, or do you use an extender?
I use just flat tap water.
Just tap water.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. You'll see it's off screen maybe a little bit, but I'm just dipping it in. And my mixture in this, you'll notice I'm on just the base coat in the blue and green. There's probably 2 or 3 base coats in it, and it's fairly well thinned. 2 parts water to 1 part paint.
Okay.
And just so you get a nice, smooth, even coverage.
Cool.
So here's where I put down the steel colored paint, and for this demo, I used Reaper Tarnished Steel 9206, and for the gold, I used Old Bronze 9197, and it gets a little gunked up here. Just shake up the bottle really good. You can even pry the cap off too. Drop it on the wet palette. But there you go. Okay. And I will thin out my metallic paints as well, generally 1-to-1 with water. Really what you're looking for here is just to get a nice, smooth, even coat. And I started on the edges, just to make it a little bit cleaner. And the one thing that I realized I needed to do prior to the setup for this video was A, not put my 2 water cups that tightly together, but B, have a separate water dish for your metallic paints.
Oh, right.
Right, because they're 2 different types of paints, and the last thing you want to do is get your metal flakiness into your regular paints. Right. You tend to learn that the hard way sometimes, and then you just ruin your colors unless you want them to be metallic-y. So here I'm putting the bronze on, again, the green area again, using the correct water to clean the brush. And sometimes I will have 2 different brushes, one for painting metallics and one for painting the normal acrylic paints, but this time I didn't.
Now, when you're doing this kind of thing, the wet palette, I know a lot of painters use the wet palette. Can you just use this using a styrofoam plate? You
can. I mean, and I've grown accustomed to using a wet palette because I live in Colorado where it's very dry, and so your paints tend to dry out a little bit more. The nice thing also about a wet palette, regardless of where you are, is if you're painting and you've mixed up some really nice colors that you want to use, yet you need to take a break from painting or even come back to it the next day, you put the lid on, you open the lid up, and your paints are still good. Yeah.
Ready to roll.
So we skip forward a little bit, and I have the base coat of the steel in the steel area covering the blue, and the bronze in the on the green. I just poured a little more water in there with the lights. I think it was starting to dry out the wet palette a tiny bit. And the next color, and I call my class Shaded Metallics, is this where we're going to get into the shading part. So for the steel, I like to use blue liner. And for the bronze, in this case, I'm using a red liner. And what this is doing, when you have a metallic surface, and you can kind of see it in the cups in the on the video there. You'll see where the light is hitting the cup. Now my head is in the way. But you'll see where it's really bright. And where the light has gone away towards the very bottom of the cup, where the cup's starting to touch the mat, it's dark, and that's where it loses the light. So that's what we're trying to do with Shaded Metallics. The third paint I added down there was a new paint by Reaper. It's Steel Wash. That's a great color to kind of play around with. You can mix it in with your blue liner or even your red liner. It kind of helps you knock down those shininess of it. And again, what we're doing here is I'm working, and the miniature's a little off camera here, working and knocking out the shadows as much as possible. And it's very wet and thin paint. This is probably closer to not quite a wash or a tint, but 4-to-1, 3-to-1 water. You can see it kind of pooling up on the video
So
screen.
it's very thin.
Very super thin. And then I'm just trying to get a nice little fine point. Sometimes I'll use my hand to kind of clean it up a little bit. And I'm edging around the bronze triangle that's on his shoulder pad.
I see.
And that adds a little bit of contrast between the two plates and helps it pop out a little bit more.
Oops, fell off the screen a little
Fell
bit
off
there.
the screen a little bit more. But you have a big head in the screen too, which is always nice.
Yes.
All right, so right now I'm putting down the colors for the highlight. I have put the metallic colors down.
And what gold is that?
That is one of the Reaper Bones colors, Dragon Gold.
Okay.
So 9450. And then for the silver one, it's polished silver, which is 9054, one of the MSP paints. And so I take a little bit of the gold, and where I'm trying to pop out those higher highlights in the gold areas around the edging of the pauldron and the top of the triangle on the shoulder pad. So very small, tiny, kind of picking out the little the little details in that little triangle symbol. And then I'll come back and mix a little bit of the bronze and have a little transition color in between.
Makes a whole new color.
Makes a whole new color. So right here I've added a tiny bit of that true silver to the gold just to make it a little bit brighter. And for the gold area, this would be my near to final highlight. And just helping the transition by mixing the two colors
So that's the
together.
gold and silver mixed together right there.
And then I'll just take the gold. Even though we're working in the gold, I'll use the silver as the final highlight because that's where the light really hits. And then I went back and added a little bit of gold in just to kind of help the transition. And you'll see again, even with this, that the paint is still very thin. And another trick too is just to continually keep cleaning your brush. And so I cleaned my brush and I went back to the red liner paint, and that's just to kind of accentuate the shadows a little bit more. So here I'm going and I'm adding some more highlights and cleaning up a little bit on the steel part.
So there's no specific formula. You're kind of just sort of feeling your way through it, mixing the colors, what you think looks best at the particular moment.
Yeah, and when I'm not doing a video like this, I'll have all these colors already out of my palette, and I'm working all the places at one time. It just kind of I broke it down this way to kind of show the steps of it. But once you learn the steps, you're kind of doing this basically all at one time. And you're constantly going back and working more shadows, punching the highlights a little bit more, cleaning it up. And if you ever get a shadow that's too big of an area, you can come back with your metallic steel color and kind of dot in and correct it and add some more steel back in. So here we are.
You've got everything filled in?
Everything filled in. We have some shadows and we have some highlights, and we could be done here.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there is more. So what I like to try to do, especially with the fantasy style miniatures, is add a little more interest to it. So I took some clear blue, that's 9097, and this is clear purple, which is 9099. And I will take these paints, and these are really rich, saturated pigment paints. So where the other blue and green that we used initially for the base coats were desaturated, here's an example of saturated paints, and I will make this super thin, and you'll see how intense that blue is. Just add a
Yeah.
little bit in. Make sure I get a nice, super watery. And I'm adding just a little bit of tint. And so the key with this is less is more. It shouldn't just be applied all over the steel surface. So I like to try to find my mid-tone area, and I'll pull in that tinting color into the shadow.
So how is this different than just a regular wash then?
A regular wash tends to be the definition. Everyone kind of has their own definition, but it tends to be all over, covering the whole entire miniature and letting that wash fall into the recesses, and it accentuates a little bit more. This is just a little bit more control where I have my surface already painted. I just want to add a hint of another color.
It's a tinting.
Yeah. And so I'm adding this purple to the gold area, but also trying to tie it back in into the steel as well.
Okay.
And and if I was painting an entire miniature, and say this guy had a big cloak in the back where his cloak was red, but he had steel armor, I would take maybe the red clear paint and thin it out just like that, and I'll add some color into the steel of that red to kind of tie the two pieces together. Yeah. And you can see the blue. It takes a few kind of applications since you're doing some thin layers for it to really start showing up. I think it's a little bit better to take your time, put a few thin layers on, than to try to get it all at one time. It can be really easy just to get a blob on, and it just doesn't look. This looks hopefully a little more natural.
So this was a very quick demonstration on Michael Proctor's Shaded Metallics class. If you want to see more, you can come to Reapercon 2018, take Michael's class, get much more in-depth information. Michael?
And get you a free copy of Sir William the Peacemaker.
Yeah, your class admission. Yeah, your class ticket gets you the free mini along with Michael's instructions. So we'll see you guys at Reapercon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.